Thank you for joining us in our next exciting episode of the 8-Inch Conundrum. This episode, Containment Breach by D. Wayne Harbison. Please be sure to like and share this video with your friends and on social media. Comment below where you are listening from and how you found my page. I'm always interested in that information. And please feel free to start a conversation about the story and ask me anything about the story. I'm very open to conversation about my work. Now, onto the story. The 8-Inch Conundrum. Episode 2, Containment Breach. By D. Wayne Harbison. They'd all been wearing the black and gold bodysuits for nearly a full day, but no one had dared to speak about them out loud. The silence around their sudden appearance hung thick, like an unspoken dare no one wanted to take. Celine could feel it in every glance, every averted gaze. None of them had forgotten what they saw in Rowan's room. He had floated like some half-remembered dream. He'd been a figure lit by raw symbols and silver-gold fire, suspended above his bed, eyes shut in restless sleep. No one knew what it meant, and no one wanted to be the first to ask. Not yet. Celine adjusted her suit absently, fingers brushing the high collar. It moved with her like water, lightweight but firm, clinging just enough to feel tailored to her body. If it had seams, they were invisible. She no longer even thought about putting on regular clothes. The suit had become second skin. She found Brennan near the garden, pacing in lazy arcs under the soft morning glow that filtered through the artificial sky. The corner of his mouth lifted when he saw her. "Hey," she said, stepping in close. He leaned into her without hesitation, pulling her against his side. "Morning," he murmured. "Sleep okay?" "Define okay," she replied. "I don't think dreamless sedation counts." They strolled toward a grove of miniature cherry trees. She checked the sensors nearby, counting 3 cameras overhead and 1 node buried in the soil. She focused, dimming her internal energy just enough to make the field around them flicker. It felt like snuffing out the lights behind a curtain. "Did it work?" Brennan asked. "I think so," she whispered. "For a little while." He leaned in and kissed her. Soft. Familiar. Real. She exhaled slowly. "There were condoms in my drawer," she said, pulling back. "Micronized. Packaged. The supply was increased. Carefully stocked." Brennan blinked. "You serious?" She nodded. "Someone went through all our things. They were planning for intimacy." He scratched the back of his neck. "Same here." Drawer refilled. He gave her a crooked smile. "Also, can I just say? Having your condoms miniaturized is a blow to a guy's ego." She snorted, laughing softly, and leaned against his chest. "You're ridiculous." "Yeah," he said. "But I'm yours." They kissed again, slower this time, but still cautious. Celine didn't fully trust the power fluctuations she had induced to keep all sensors offline. Even here, privacy was a luxury. They returned to the courtyard a few minutes later. Kale and Tamsin were just emerging from the opposite side of the flower beds. Tamsin's usually precise braid was unraveling, and her shirt was untucked. Kale looked flushed, his golden hair mussed. Celine raised an eyebrow. Brennan smirked. "Morning," Tamsin said with mock innocence. "Morning," Celine replied. "Sleep okay?" "Define okay," Kale echoed with a wink. They settled in for breakfast near the fountain, everyone pretending things were ordinary except for Rowan. He was seated apart, cross-legged on a bench with a book spread across his knees, a biscuit with sausage on a napkin, and a glass of tea next to him. The cover was an obscure physics journal, but the inside had pages from 4 different texts, stitched together notes on theoretical spellcraft and quantum resonance fields. Celine watched him for a moment. He hadn't reacted when they arrived. Not a flicker of acknowledgement. It made her feel strange. It seemed like his isolation had intensified since they arrived. She rose and walked over. Rowan looked up but didn't say anything. For a moment, she saw a deep loneliness in his eyes. Then it was gone in a flash, and he smiled slightly. Celine returned the smile and held out a folded. "Found this in the library. Thought you'd want it. It's a translation index. Tracks runic overlap between hermetic glyphs and fundamental string patterns." He blinked, surprised. Then slowly he took it. "Thanks," he said, voice low. She gave him a half-smile. "You're not invisible, Rowan. Not to me." Then she stood and walked away. He sat perfectly still for a long moment, the paper in his hand. "What was that about?" Brennan asked as she sat back down next to him. "Just something I came across while I was digging through the library. You would not believe how esoteric that library is. There's stuff in there that is so outlandish that you'd think it was science fiction or fantasy, but it's actually peer-reviewed papers. Granted, most of them are peer-reviewed by DARPA, but they're taking some ideas seriously. Brennan chuckled and told her, "There's a running joke on the internet that DARPA will weaponize anything. I guess it's not so much of a joke. Think about it, Brennan," Cale said from across the table. "We got caught up in a micronization project from the 80s and stuck in an oversized terrarium. It should surprise any of us what we find there. Or maybe we should be surprised," Tamsin interjected. "They're giving us information, and information is power. I think they want to see what we will do with it," Celine told her. "We were put together for a reason. We've all got IQs that start with 2. Brennan has mechanical and electrical engineering knowledge and skills that would make MIT's top researchers jealous." She nodded to Cale and said, "Cale is an expert in biology, chemistry, medicine, and ecological systems on a level nobody has ever seen." Then, turning to Tamsin, she said, "And your grasp of computers, computer systems, and quantum computing could revolutionize the world. And then there's me. I'll be the first to admit that my understanding of high-energy physics and quantum mechanics would make Hawking cry." She nodded at Rowan and added, "And Rowan, his genius is so pan-disciplined it's scary. He sees patterns in everything and analyzes and understands them on a fundamental level. How many languages does he speak and read? How many of us have gone to him to check our own work? We've built gadgets at Apex that are right out of science fiction." Smiling over at Brennan, she asked, "Didn't I once hear you and Rowan talking about how easy it would be to build a lightsaber? They want us to have access to knowledge. They want to see what we can build and see us being shrunk as an easy way to control us." Cale found Rowan kneeling beside the stream, surrounded by specimen jars, data tablets, a coiled-sounding line, and a stack of hand-labeled vials. The copper-haired teen was snapping photos, taking water samples, and dictating notes into the tablet in a calm monotone. He looked out at the stream. No, it was a river at this scale. It was probably only about 20 feet across, but it was over 200 feet to them. It made him stop and think. The banks were lined with small bushes, a few small beech trees that thrust themselves like giant redwoods into the artificial sky, dogwoods and redbuds were interspersed with New Jersey tea bushes, privet, witch hazel, and wild hydrangea, cattails, and tall grass. He could see small fish swimming in schools, probably minnows. Cale stepped closer. The smell of real flowers was suddenly overpowering this close to one of the wild hydrangeas. "What are you doing?" "Studying," Rowan said, not looking up. He took another reading, dipped the sensor into the water, and scribbled in a notebook beside him. "The environment." Cale crouched beside him, curious despite himself. "Why?" Rowan looked up at him and shrugged, saying, "Because when we get out of here, and we will get out of here, we will have to survive. Argus has already laid the groundwork. I'm trying to reverse engineer and improve it. This environment requires outside power and intervention to maintain, not unlike an actual terrarium or aquarium. I'm trying to determine the best way to make it self-sustaining." He tapped the streambed. "To us, that's a 30-foot deep, 200-foot wide river. In reality, it's a large artificial stream maintained by chemicals and a passing knowledge that any well-informed aquarist or terrarium keeper would have. They've stocked it with minnows, aquarium plants, small frogs, and salamanders. Not dangerous individually, but we're 8 inches tall. A single misjudgment and something eats your face." Cale nodded, thoughtful. "So how would you build it better?" "Balance," Rowan said. "Real ecosystems run on tension. You want an artificial ecology that doesn't collapse or consume us. No predators we can't handle. So sunfish, maybe some brim. Frogs, sure, but no bullfrogs or cane toads. Definitely no large catfish." Rowan thought about it and mentally kicked himself. This was his area of expertise. He should be thinking like Rowan. Instead, he was worrying about finding some quiet time with Tamsin where the voyeurs upstairs couldn't see them making out. He brought his mind back to the question at hand. "Crawfish," Cale offered. "Crawfish are borderline. Fun if you're Cajun. To us, the smaller ones would make a good lobster-like dinner. The larger ones could be dangerous." They chuckled. "What about snakes?" Cale asked. "Green snakes and garters, maybe. No copperheads or cottonmouths, and definitely no rattlesnakes. Insects will explode in population without checks. So, snakes and maybe birds. But wrens, not jays. Crows could work. They're smart. They could even be trained and sometimes bond with humans. Chickens? Too big. Quail could work. Eggs and meat. High return, and are even a delicacy." Cale grinned. "No pork or beef?" "Too massive," Rowan said. Even a small piglet is bigger than we are. Maybe some scaled-down breed or lepus species. Rabbits, maybe. But we'd have to selectively breed the dwarf species. I'm not sure how the girls would react to that, though. He turned to the flora. Grass becomes brush to us. We'd probably need to use moss for turf. Microclover's too tall. Even at its maximum height of 2 inches, it comes up to our calves. Corn? Viable, but harvesting it's going to be like felling trees. 3 sisters planting, corn, squash, and green beans planted together to replenish what each takes from the soil would make a decent microagriculture base. Spices must be pulverized into an extremely fine powder to prevent overpowering our taste buds. Rowan sighed. My favorite food is watermelon. Forget that. The rinds alone would weigh more than I do. Kale laughed. We'll get you a slice and a forklift. Small tomatoes. Peaches. Grapes. Berries. Berries are good. Strawberries could be a disaster if they rot unchecked, though. All that sugar attracts insects. Rowan leaned back, staring at the sky through the terrarium dome. We're not just prisoners. We're lab mice in a biodome. But we don't have to stay helpless. Kale looked at him and realized something subtle had shifted. Rowan wasn't just observing. He was planning. Brennan arrived a few minutes later, hands in pockets, frowning. What are you two doing? Escape planning, Rowan said as he stared at the artificial sky. Brennan blinked. Excuse me? Environmental survivability. We can't go back to the outside world. So we'll build one we can live in. And when we get out, we'll be ready. Kale watched Brennan's posture change as realization set in. You've really thought this through. Rowan gave a tired smile. I'm trying to. Somebody has to. Once I accepted that I was never going back to normal, I had all this free mental bandwidth. I can't waste it on self-pity. There was no recrimination in his voice, but Kale felt it anyway. He felt like he was slacking. Kale and Brennan exchanged glances. There was a weight behind Rowan's words that neither had appreciated before. He saw that Brennan might be seeing it too. Later, Kale pulled Tamsin aside under the blooming snapdragons. Have you ever noticed how Rowan doesn't waste time? He asked. Tamsin raised a brow. He spends his time reading physics journals and quoting obscure sci-fi, she said almost dismissively. He also just outlined a viable survival ecosystem scaled for our size. While the rest of us were adjusting, he was strategizing. She paused. So he's smart. We knew that. This time her tone was dismissive. He's more than smart, Kale said. He's planning beyond Argus. Beyond containment. He's preparing for freedom. He's ahead of us, Tammy. All of us. Tamsin looked thoughtful. So what do we do with that? Kale gave a small shrug. We stop thinking of him as the odd man out, and start thinking of him as our contingency plan. She didn't answer, but she didn't walk away either. The sleep field generator emitted a low-pitched hum that rippled through the chamber. Miriam Halberd stood with her arms crossed just beyond the perimeter of the containment dome, eyes locked on the screen as faint waves of bioenergy gently pulsed over the 5 teens' resting bodies. The soporific field targeted the pineal gland, triggering an artificial melatonin cascade. Human subjects fell into a dreamless, placid sleep within 90 seconds. They had exactly 37 minutes before the feedback mechanisms began to strain cellular equilibrium. Field is active, Prentice said from his station. The dome slowly retracted, segments pulling back with precision-engineered grace. Cold blue light washed over the courtyard as a deployment ring descended from above. 5 technicians, each wearing darkened visors and lightweight sealed exosuits, clipped themselves into the lowering harness. Mind the biometric scans. They're fluctuating, came a voice through the radio. As the platform reached the courtyard floor, the technicians moved quickly but carefully. Even unconscious, the teens radiated waves of unpredictable energy. The team split, 2 heading for Rowan Pike and Celine Albright respectively. The other 3 managed the relocation logistics. Halberd kept her gaze fixed on the monitor feed. Focus on Pike and Albright, she said into her comm. We need full metabolic profiling, psionic waveform mapping, and a complete analysis of their cellular matrix. Watch for resistance. They've shown early signs of MDC expression. Copy. Beginning extraction, the lead tech replied. Inside the containment chamber, the techs attached slim harnesses to the teens, hoisting them up and into insulated containment capsules. As their miniature bodies were gently laid on diagnostic tables, Halberd moved to the clean room's observation suite. The examination lab was microscaled to match the patient's new size. The doctors and biotechnicians had been reduced using a stable, short-duration version of the micronization process. Blood pressure is elevated but steady, one technician reported as he tapped at an overlay. Attempting venous insertion now. The needle bent slightly as it met Rowan's skin. Damn. His dermis density just spiked. It's like trying to draw blood from a Kevlar vest. Try the subclavian. Use the ceramic core tip, another responded. There was a hiss, a tense pause, and then a bead of blood finally rose to the surface. The effort left a large, darkening bruise near his clavicle. Celine's vitals are shifting too, came another voice. Her body temperature is stabilizing at 5 degrees above human norm, and the electric potential across her epidermis is climbing. We're going to need Faraday shielding next time. Halberd rubbed her eyes. Just get the samples, and collect particulate data from the suits. The moment she mentioned the suits, Prentice looked up. We've got all 5 suits in isolation now. Initial scans are weird. There's no stitching, no bonding points, no fasteners. Halberd's mouth tightened. What do you mean, no fasteners? I mean they're seamless, Prentice said, gesturing to the display. Like they were grown, not made. I can't even find an interface seam at the neckline or sleeves. And they respond to biometric proximity. You're saying they're biofield reactive? Exactly. That's been theoretical for decades. There's no record of a functioning prototype anywhere. Halberd stared at the screen showing Rowan's body suspended in a diagnostic cradle. And you're sure these manifested spontaneously? Sensor logs show a spike in Rowan's psionic field during his REM cycle, followed by a materialization pattern. That cloak of his folded into existence like mist. Halberd turned away. Install tracking and monitoring nanothreads. I want embedded telemetry in every suit, internal and external sensors. Heart rate, endocrine levels, electrical output, GPS resonance. The works. Ma'am, we're pushing the time window. I know. Skip the resuiting. Return the children to their beds. We'll install the suits later. As the technicians prepared to return the unconscious teens, Halberd stepped aside, letting Prentice join her at the observation table. They left bruises, he said. They'll know something happened. They'll suspect, she countered. But they won't remember anything concrete. Prentice tapped a stylus against his palm. We need to talk about the boys' conversation earlier today. Cale and Rowan. The logs from the dome surveillance caught all of it. I read it. He's not just speculating. He's planning. Escape isn't an if for him. It's a when. She turned and locked eyes with him. I'll account for it in terrarium too. You think a better cage is the answer? No, she said flatly. But until I understand what they are, the cage is non-negotiable. He looked like he wanted to say more. Instead, he leaned back and folded his arms. Their metabolic scans are off the charts. They're adapting to their scale, not fighting it. You might not be able to keep them here, Miriam. She said nothing. After a moment, he changed the subject. Pressure's mounting. General Cotterson called again. What did he want this time? He asked if you'd been in touch with Senator Thorne. Halberd's eyebrows rose slightly. Interesting. He also mentioned he used to command Colton Pike at Wright Pat. Said he still has friends on congressional oversight. That gave her pause. If he's floating that kind of leverage, he's not just checking in, Prentice continued. He's lining up something. Halberd's face hardened. Get me all surveillance tapes from the last 24 hours. Secure the logs, scrub the backup cache, and increase the security cycle on internal comms. No leaks. As Prentice turned to leave, he glanced over his shoulder. Miriam, we might be sitting on something bigger than the Koschei project. She watched the dome reseal over the courtyard and whispered, Let's just hope it doesn't blow up in our faces. Celine stirred in her bed, the faint light from the simulated dawn filtering through the canopy above. Her fingers brushed over bare skin, and she sat bolt upright. Her bodysuit gone. She distinctly remembered wearing it to bed. She threw back the soft linen sheet and stared down at herself in shock. Scrambling from bed, she approached the small mirror above her dresser. There, beneath her left clavicle, was an angry, deep purple bruise. About the size of a quarter, ringed in red. Her heart pounded. They had touched her while she slept. She didn't scream. Her jaw clenched tight, breath caught somewhere between fury and dread. She yanked open her dresser, grabbed a pair of sweatpants and a loose t-shirt, and pulled them on. Her feet moved on instinct toward Brennan's room. But as she stepped into the hallway, she heard a voice. What the hell? Rowan's voice. Sharp, confused, and very awake. She paused by his door and knocked. Just a minute, came the flustered reply. She heard the rustle of drawers, quick movements, and then the door cracked open. Rowan stood there, a t-shirt thrown on hastily and running shorts hanging loosely around his narrow waist. "What?" he asked, flushed and rattled. Her eyes caught the discoloration peeking from beneath the collar of his shirt. "You too." "Me too what? You woke up nude? With this?" She tugged the collar of her t-shirt aside to reveal the bruise. He blinked, looked down, and slowly nodded. "Yeah, same spot." Her stomach twisted tighter. Before she could say more, the soft shuffle of movement behind her signaled the arrival of the others. Cale, Tamsin, and Brennan stepped into the hall, already suited up. "What's going on?" Brennan asked, his eyes scanning Celine first, then narrowing as they shifted to Rowan. "We were violated," Celine said. Her voice was low, cold. "I woke up naked. And this." She showed the bruise again. Cale's expression hardened. Tamsin looked stricken. Brennan's face darkened, not in confusion, but in growing rage. His eyes locked on Rowan. Rowan's face went pale. "I didn't touch her. I woke up the same way. Look." He pulled down the collar of his shirt to reveal the same bruise. The tension in the air turned brittle. Brennan stared at him. For a long moment, nothing moved. Then, with visible effort, Brennan breathed deeply and turned away. "I believe you. I wasn't ready for that." Celine exhaled slowly. Her body still buzzed with the wrongness of it all. Cale's voice broke the silence. "Breakfast. We should talk about this." They filed toward the courtyard, quiet and tight-lipped. Rowan trailed behind, clearly wounded. Brennan pulled out a seat next to Celine when they reached the tables. Cale and Tamsin sat together. Rowan took a plate, nodded once, and moved to the bench near the garden without a word. "Rowan," Brennan called, but the redhead didn't respond. He took his plate across to the other side of the courtyard, sat, head low, and ate in silence. Celine leaned toward Brennan. "He didn't do anything to me." "He wouldn't." "I know," Brennan muttered. "But I'm not sure he knows I know." Cale cut in, his voice edged with irritation. "Then fix it. You can't lead if you're making your teammates feel like trash. Get your head out of your ass." Brennan didn't answer. He just stared at the untouched food on his plate. The air in the Hollow's central library was cooler than the rest of the dome. A faint smell of printed plastic and electrostatic charges clung to the walls. Tamsin moved slowly through the stacks, her fingers trailing along the thin, micronized spines of books that had no business existing at this scale. It was quiet, save for the low ambient hum of filtered airflow. Her mind was elsewhere. Cale, his golden hair tousled after their time together in the wildflower maze that morning, filled her thoughts. The warmth of his gaze, the way his wings folded protectively behind her as he pulled her close, these sensations still lingered in her chest. She smiled to herself until her thoughts shifted to Rowan. Rowan Pike. Shoulder-length red hair, green eyes that burned with intensity, and a silence that seemed to weigh on every room he entered. He didn't fit. Not just because he lacked a partner. He didn't act like one of them. He didn't speak unless asked or push his ideas unless challenged. And yet, he always seemed 10 steps ahead. She told herself it was just his background. Lower class. Appellation. That explained it. But even as she thought it, discomfort wormed its way into her chest. Ill-educated? No. He had the same training as they did. Possibly more. Uncouth? No. He was polite and reserved. His hygiene was fine. He never made her uncomfortable. So why did she feel this way? A subtle flicker caught her eye, a low pulse of amber light, like a heartbeat behind a row of physics treatises. Tamsin narrowed her eyes and stepped closer. There was a table behind the books, an amber message light indicating a message. She picked it up and studied it. Powering it on, the screen immediately went to a line of code. It was the backdoor node she had discovered after the night Rowan rewrote the whole system, but it had been written off as a dormant system tap. Now it was live. She began reading the code. It was the maintenance code that she'd used to get into Halberd's files. But parts of it were different now. At first, she dismissed it as Halberd's computer text closing the door, but realized it was still active. Again, her mind drifted back to her thoughts of Cale and Rowan. It had her so distracted and frustrated that she nearly missed it. Buried in the junk lines of code that had been overwritten was a message, clear as day. Your father has us looking for you. Now that we've found you, stiff upper lip, lassie. P. Branch is working on getting you out. HK. Her breath hitched. HK. Her father's friend. Harlan Knox. The man who had always called her Lassie, who told her ghost stories and taught her how to trace a signal through 7 layers of misdirection. She blinked and reread it. She hadn't noticed it before because she'd been lost in thoughts about Rowan. That realization bothered her more than she wanted to admit. She closed the panel slowly and stood back, leaning against the shelf. Maybe Celine would understand. Minutes later, the 2 girls sat on a curved bench beneath the courtyard's domed canopy. The artificial sky shimmered faintly above them as gazanias swayed in the artificial breeze. "I need to ask you something," Tamsin said, folding her hands in her lap. Celine tilted her head and pushed a lock of blonde hair behind her ear. "All right, it's about Rowan." Celine's expression softened. "What about him?" "I keep trying to figure out what it is about him that bothers me," Tamsin said. "I don't dislike him. He's respectful. He's brilliant. But I'm always uncomfortable around him. Because he doesn't fit into your world," Celine replied without judgment. Tamsin hesitated. "Maybe. He's not Kale. Not Brennan. He's just different. I thought it was class. I still do, I guess. But then I start wondering, why does that bother me?" Celine leaned forward. "Tamsin, you were raised with a certain image of the world. You were raised among the gentry, with a certain structure and carefully circumscribed etiquette. Until you came to Apex, all of your friends were in similar situations, not necessarily among the gentry, but refined, fitting into your preconceived worldview. When you got to Apex, you were met with others that you could pigeonhole into that worldview for the most part. Even Kale has a certain polish to him because of his grandfather. But Rowan breaks that model without even trying. And that makes him threaten what you know." "I don't want to see it that way," Tamsin said softly. "Then don't," Celine said. "Start seeing him as someone trapped here, just like the rest of us. Someone who's trying in his own way to make things work. You don't have to like him. Just don't dismiss him." Tamsin looked away. "He's smarter than me, isn't he?" Celine didn't smile. She simply nodded. "But he doesn't think that makes him better. That's what matters." She paused for a moment, carefully considering her next words. Finally, with a sigh, she said, "Brennan is going through the same thing that you are, but to a lesser extent. He's trying to see Rowan as a whole member of the team. Rowan is making him rethink his own prejudices. I think he keeps expecting Rowan to say something ugly, racist, or bigoted, because he comes from Kentucky. Rowan isn't obliging him, and I don't think he's likely to because that's just not who Rowan is, and that's throwing Brennan off balance." "I haven't considered that," Tamsin said. Then, she sat with those thoughts in silence for a long moment. And when she finally stood to leave, she whispered to herself, stiff upper lip. Brennan found himself wandering the hollow. The artificial sky overhead shifted into morning light, filtered through the simulated atmosphere. Eventually, he spotted Rowan at the crest of the hill where they had awoken after their second relocation. The redhead sat with his arms wrapped around his knees, staring hard at the shimmering terrarium wall as if willing it to dissolve. Rowan didn't turn around. "I didn't touch her." "I know," Brennan said. "I was wrong to assume that you did." Rowan exhaled hard. "You didn't just assume I did. You created an entire scenario in your head where I did more than just touch her. What you imagined it so vividly I could see it in my mind. The disgust you felt, the idea of someone else touching her like that, especially me, it nearly knocked me over. How you see me in your head is unfiltered, Brennan. I'm not some lovesick puppy waiting for the first excuse to jump your girlfriend. I'm not some mountain filth with no business near any girl outside the Appalachians. Even that thought feeds into your own stereotypical prejudices. I don't even have a sister." Brennan shifted awkwardly. "But you don't have a partner, and that bothers you." "Yes, it bothers me. Yes, it affects how I see myself. And so does how you see me. That doesn't mean I lack self-control. It doesn't mean I would interfere with someone else's relationship. Give me some credit. Not just for respecting you, but for respecting myself too." Brennan hesitated. "How do you know what I was thinking?" Rowan finally turned to look at him, his green eyes flat. "Project Koschei created psionics. Guess who ended up a telepath?" The word struck Brennan like a slap. He stiffened. "You read my mind? I can't do it all the time. But you nearly knocked me down with what you were thinking." It hit like a shotgun blast. Brennan looked down, the shame burning into his face. "I'm sorry. I shouldn't have thought that. I shouldn't have blamed you." "No, you shouldn't have," Rowan said. "But you did." Brennan nodded slowly. "We need to practice with our powers. Together. I have been. All of us," Brennan said. We need to know what we can do and what each other can do. 10:30. Courtyard. Rowan didn't respond immediately. Then he stood and brushed off his shorts. Fine. At 10:30, Brennan stood in the open courtyard, arms folded across his chest. The others gathered, Tamsin in a blur of motion, Celine in a swirl of energy, Cale with a hawk-like tilt to his golden-haired head. Brennan waited a beat longer. Rowan appeared, silent but present. We're changing, Brennan said. All of us. Celine found out Halberd's files claim we're psionics, but I don't think that's the whole truth. He turned and looked up at the dome. That's right, Halberd. We're on to you. And since you're watching everything anyway, we're done pretending. We are going to escape this place, and when we do, you're going down. Tamsin stepped back. Was that smart? Brennan gave her a crooked smile. Sometimes it's good to be clear. Rowan spoke up from the back. She's been monitoring everything since we woke up. That's not news. Then let's give her something to watch, Brennan said. Time to show what we can do. Celine stepped forward first. Her body lit from within, electrical arcs dancing across her skin. She raised her hands and conjured geometric shapes made of pure light. One unfolded like a cube blooming into a lotus. Another reared up like a scaffolding of energy, capable of gripping, moving, and lifting. Cale followed. In moments, his body shimmered, shifting into a towering bipedal tiger with wings. Then he shrank into a gray wolf. Then a massive golden eagle. Then back to human form. Finally, his body blurred and changed, his jaw sharpened, his shoulders widened, and Brennan found himself staring at himself. Then Tamsin. Then Cale again. Tamsin ran a circle around the terrarium at speeds that cracked the sound barrier, her wake rippling grass and leaves in all directions. She stopped on a dime at the very edge of the dome, arms crossed, her body glinting like copper in the morning light. Brennan got the idea that she could go hypersonic and smash through the wall of the terrarium in a single strike. Then Rowan stepped forward. He raised a hand and a twig from a nearby bush flew into his palm. He twisted it once and let it fall. Telekinesis, Rowan muttered. You all knew about that already. He then walked calmly to the kitchen, took a steak knife from a drawer, and turned it in his hand. Without warning, he tried to stab it up under his rib cage into his chest. Celine shouted. Brennan lunged, but the blade bent and broke at the point of contact. Massive damage capacity, Rowan said softly. Apparently, that's a thing now. Brennan stared, shaken. Finally, he launched into the air, his body lifting with grace. He soared up to the peak of the dome and planted his hands against it. With a low grunt, the material warped beneath his fingers. The whole dome creaked and groaned under the stress. Landing softly, he looked up again. We can leave this place now. We just don't have any place to go, yet. The night cycle in Argus Facility 12 wasn't truly dark. Even during lights out, a cool cobalt glow pulsed faintly from the baseboards of the observation suite, mimicking the bioluminescent hues of deep-sea organisms. The light was supposed to calm the nervous system, reinforce circadian rhythm, and suppress dreams. For Prentice, it only made his eyes itch. He leaned forward, fingers hovering above the holographic keyboard, the soft pulse of the command interface reflecting off his irises. His workstation was tucked behind a secondary firewall. The techs called it the Sandbox, a lower security interface where junior personnel were allowed to run simulations and test response models without impacting active systems. It was also where strange data went to die. Prentice wasn't meant to be on shift. He had swapped with Riker after she came down with one of the sinus flares from the recycled air. Now, it was just him, 3 vending machines humming in the corridor, and the faint hum of the hollow's environmental generators vibrating through the floor like an artificial heartbeat. A low alert pinged in the bottom corner of his screen. Node variants detected. Source: Terrarium Biofield Array/Subnet 936X. He frowned. That tag didn't belong. His fingers danced. He expanded the logs and swept for tampering signatures. Nothing obvious. But there was a tiny string of metadata nested inside a routine diagnostics package. Encoded. Fragmented. Old school, like something passed through 5 generations of legacy compression. He narrowed his eyes. What are you doing in my logs, little guy? The string unpacked under virtual light, like a kaleidoscope caught mid-blink. The core message wasn't a command. It was an observation. A behavioral snapshot of Rowan Pike's psionic emissions was paired against a mirror algorithm not native to Argus. Comparative match, P-branch heuristic model 7b. Stress echo consistent with quantum entanglement artifacts. Prentice blinked. P-branch. That was British Defence Intelligence, Parapsychological Operations Division. Off books. Off record. As close to science fiction as Black Ops got. He checked again. The packet wasn't just tagged. It was watching. Recording and comparing real-time data from the Hollow's psionic fields was still live. Cold sweat prickled under his collar. He wiped a palm on his thigh. His lab coat felt too hot. The air too dense. His cursor hovered over the report anomaly tag, but he hesitated. Protocol was clear: report, redact, elevate. But curiosity scraped at his chest like a whisper behind glass. Prentice had joined Argus because he wanted to build a better world, not bury secrets under acronyms and shadows. He'd seen the kids. Not just the data models. The real ones are walking, laughing, and testing the limits of physics in ways no one could explain. They weren't anomalies. They were beautiful. He opened a side channel. A sandbox within the sandbox. A ghost lane is meant for software debugging, not data transmission. He slipped the metadata into a compressed shell, setting the flag to academic review request, a relic from when Argus still partnered with external research labs. Then he sent it with a breath he didn't realize he was holding. Not to P-branch. Not to Koschei. Just out. Somewhere safe, he told himself. Somewhere it might matter. The screen went white. Not crashed, wiped. Every console went blank, then returned with a red border blinking in sharp rhythm. Unauthorized transmission detected. Lockdown initiated. Level 3 containment protocol, active. No. The door behind him hissed open. 2 Argus officers in matte black exosuits stepped into the room. No weapons drawn. But no smiles either. Agent Prentice, one said, voice filtered through a vocoder mask. Stand. Step back from the terminal. He obeyed, heart thudding like a trip hammer in his chest. I didn't send it to anyone hostile, he said quickly. It was just a metadata string. Behavioral logs. Not classified, not really. It was tagged already. British fingerprints. You can see that, right? I didn't. A third figure appeared behind the guards. Tall, trim, silver-haired. Dr. Miriam Halberd. She didn't speak. Just looked at the screen. Then at him. Then at the officers. Secure the logs, she said. Tag all backups. Then isolate his access. Dr. Halberd, he started, breath hitching. She cut him off with a glance. Not cold. Not cruel. Just final. You had promised, Prentice, she said. You still might. But curiosity without containment is contagion. The guard stepped in. One took his arm. As he was guided toward the door, he looked back at the flickering holographic readout. Rowan's name blinked on the telemetry stream. Right below it, for just a second, a new line appeared. External ping received. Encryption. Koschei/observer, line 5. The screen faded. I just wanted to understand them, Prentice said. The door hissed shut behind him. From their barely 8-inch-tall perspective, a sheer expanse of stone and moss-flecked polymer climbed endlessly toward the false sky, curving far overhead into the illusion of a sunlit day. A faint shimmer ran along its surface, like heat ripples over asphalt. Rowan could see the weave beneath it, the interlaced strands of quantum mesh and photonic camouflage. But more importantly, he could see the flaws. You got quiet again, Cale said, breaking the silence. He stood a few feet behind Rowan, arms folded, golden hair tousled by the artificial breeze that filtered through the terrarium. His raptor wings were half-furled, relaxed but present, like they belonged there. Rowan didn't look back. He was tracing a sequence into the ground with his fingertip. Just a shallow groove in the loamy earth, but the pattern held shape in his mind's eye. I'm working. Cale moved closer. That thing Brennan pulled earlier, snapping at you? That wasn't okay. Rowan shrugged one shoulder, eyes still locked on the vibrating pattern of light flickering where the dome met the trees. It's not the first time he's made assumptions about me. Cale hesitated, then asked, You think it's because you're from the mountains? Rowan glanced at him now, green eyes sharp beneath the fall of red bangs. I think Brennan's got a very tidy world in his head. People from Appalachia are supposed to be either simple or backwards. Makes it easier for him to think he's better. And it also makes it easier to assume that I'm just a disruptor, someone who doesn't play fair because I don't play the same. Cale frowned. Because of Celine? Rowan didn't answer immediately. He stood up slowly, dusting off his hands. He looks at me and sees someone who doesn't belong. It justifies all the crap he doesn't want to deal with. Like the fact that maybe Celine talked to me about things she hadn't told him. Or I can read people better than he can, which scares him. Cale looked uncomfortable. So how do you deal with it? The only way I know how, Rowan said, his voice quieter. I stay true. I don't interfere in things that aren't mine to touch. Someone else's relationship isn't my business, even if I'm stuck in the middle. Cale nodded slowly. I respect that. Rowan felt the shift in Cale's posture, the softening in his gaze, the flicker of sympathy. Pity. He ignored it. He crouched again, brushing his fingers across the dirt where he'd drawn a glyph. I'm reading patterns. Vibration matrices. Interconnectivity threads. Cale knelt beside him, watching. What do you see? Everything. Rowan's voice was low, reverent. Every strand, every knot in the weave of this place. The dome's not a solid barrier. It's a harmonic field tuned to our size and resonance. And it's aging. Fraying in places. Every time we use our powers, it vibrates a little harder. He pointed toward a faint, jagged pulse along the horizon. That's where the dome flexed during Brennan's shockwave. It didn't break, but it trembled. Cale exhaled. You could get out? Anytime I wanted, Rowan said simply. I've seen the holes. I've mapped the timing cycles. I've even written subroutines into the dome's ambient AI layer, quiet little nudges to keep doors unlocked and surveillance eyes blind at just the right moments. Then why haven't you? Rowan sat back on his heels. Because I don't have anywhere to go. Out there, I'm just a freak. A very small, very powerful freak. He looked away, then added, and maybe I thought leaving might take the pressure off Brennan. Let him have his perfect circle without the loose stone clattering around inside. Cale was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, if you went off alone, it wouldn't settle the rest of us. It would rip something open. Rowan tilted his head. Would it? Cale nodded. I'd miss you, Rowan. You're my friend. When the time comes, and you want to make your move, I've got your back. All the way. Rowan looked at him. Really looked. There was no pity now. Just sincerity. So he shared a secret. I've been experimenting, Rowan said. With casting spells. Cale blinked. Like real spells? Rowan nodded. Not from books. Those never really worked for anyone. I think I'm making them work now. I've been blending quantum resonance theory with symbolic logic. Magic is code. Cale laughed nervously. You serious? Want to see something? Rowan reached into the grass and plucked a black cricket from a bush. It was huge by their scale, nearly the size of a cat. The insect flailed in his hands, legs twitching. Rowan whispered, stone. The cricket went rigid and turned gray. Cale leaned in. Holy crap. Rowan handed it to him. It was heavier now. Cold. Granite. Put it down, Rowan said. Cale obeyed. Rowan placed 2 fingers on its back. Flesh. The cricket twitched, turned back to chitin and sinew, and leapt away into the grass. Cale stared at him. Okay. That's something. Rowan smiled faintly. That's the future. If we want it. The wind rustled the grass around them. Rowan turned back to his glyphs, fingers already moving in a new pattern, sharper, faster, timed to the dome's cycles. Behind him, Cale stood and spread his wings. Let me know when it's time. Rowan didn't look up. I will. He waited until Cale's footsteps receded. Then he pressed both palms into the glyphs, eyes narrowing. The pattern pulsed beneath him, not in light, but in resonance. It was working. The frequency gap at node Delta 7 had expanded another 0.2% since this morning. Not enough for 5 of them to break out yet, but soon. Soon, the dome wouldn't be able to hold them. Not because they'd smashed it, but because it had stopped believing it could contain them. Rowan sat back, breath slow. A grin tugged at the corner of his mouth, tired but electric. Your move, Argus, he whispered. Let's see who blinks first. The hollow click of Dr. Miriam Halberd's shoes on the metal floor echoed through the observation corridor like a metronome marking time too quickly. As she entered, her office lights adjusted to her biometric signature. Subtle, warm, clinical. She didn't notice. Her eyes were already scanning the biofield overlays as they hovered to life above her desk. Color-coded silhouettes of 5 teenage forms shimmered in translucent 3D green, gold auras, cycling in slow pulses. Halberd leaned forward and pinched 2 fingers outward across one model. It expanded into a cascade of telemetry. The sync rate had jumped again. Emotionally, metabolically, even neural rhythms were beginning to echo one another. She pressed her thumb and middle finger to her temples and exhaled slowly. She had predicted convergence. But not this fast. Not with this much tension between them. Rowan's isolation was a fault line, and Brennan's self-imposed pressure wasn't helping. Rowan knew he could escape. They all did. That training session wasn't bravado. It was a message. Halberd's fingers twitched. A new chart unfolded across the right panel. Energy dispersal across the dome's harmonic grid. At the very edge of node Delta 7, the resonance had warped. Slightly. Barely. But unmistakably. She tapped to freeze the frame and whispered, "God help us." She walked to the counter at the back of her office and poured coffee from the insulated carafe. The familiar scent drifted up, but something was off. She tasted it. Decaf. Her jaw tightened. She didn't say anything. Didn't need to. Someone had replaced her coffee. A petty jab, maybe. Or a passive-aggressive gesture. Either way, it meant they were watching her, too. A soft chime sounded. Her terminal glowed red. "Dr. Halberd," said a nervous voice over the comm, "we have something unusual." "Show me." The wall display flickered and filled with telemetry. A satellite ping. It was brief but deliberate and registered against their cloaking field. It hadn't penetrated, but it had tried. The tech's face appeared beside the data stream. "That's Russian encryption," he said. "But layered. With quantum bounce back we haven't seen since Cold War-era shadow nets. It's targeting us. The mountain. This isn't Argus tech," she murmured. "No, ma'am." Halberd turned back toward her desk and ran a hand through her silvering hair. Her gaze flicked to the biofield overlay again. Prentice. That little idiot. He had flagged something inside the system. And someone had heard him. She brought up the dome's resonance chart and overlaid it with a spatial temporal mapping log. In the threads of energy winding through the terrain like veins of colored lightning, she spotted traces of Rowan's psionic signature, etched into the dome like brushstrokes. It wasn't sabotage. It was communication. Something inside the dome was echoing signals. And something outside was listening. She switched feeds. One by one, the displays shifted to the teen subjects. Celine standing alone, her hand pulsing with coiled light, her hair lifting gently in the static aura around her. Kale bounding through a homemade obstacle course as Tamsin raced beside him in her metallic form in blurring streaks of bronze and speed lines. Brennan, suspended midair in a slow hover, cross-legged and still, his brow furrowed in concentration. Rowan, sitting at the dome's edge, fingertip aglow with greenish-white rune light, drawing invisible symbols into the soil. She stared at the feed. "They're not just adapting," she whispered. "They're linking." The soft trill of a private Argus channel blinked into the air. "Encrypted directive. Has containment stabilized?" Halberd watched it for a moment, then deleted it. She moved back to the window. The dome lay beyond, vast and shimmering in the artificial morning. The air in her office was too still, too quiet. With a cold twist in her gut, Halberd realized that she no longer felt like the warden of a secure facility. She felt like the captain of a sinking ship, smiling for the cameras while the lower decks filled with water. The political pressures were already mounting. Families wanted updates. Oversight committees were watching expenditures. And now Koschei and P Branch might be watching her, too. Her gaze hardened. Her mind began building contingencies. If they lost control, really lost control, she needed a plan. Something to preserve her position. To protect her future. Maybe even to cut her losses. But part of her still held on to the scientist. The dreamer. The woman who'd once believed in creating something greater than any of them could imagine. She touched the glass. "This is no longer a simulation," she said softly. "This is evolution." She stood there for a long moment, watching the dome shimmer beneath the high artificial light, her fingertips still pressed to the glass. The hum of the ventilation system echoed through the room, joined now by the faint tick of the system clock on her terminal. She tried to focus and remind herself that she had been chosen for this position because of her clarity and discipline. But the truth gnawed at her. She was improvising. Every step now felt like she was dancing across thin ice, smiling at the higher-ups while cracks spiderwebbed beneath her boots. There was no protocol for this. No handbook. The subject parameters had already blown past expected development curves. Her predictive models were falling apart. Her gaze flicked to a side screen. A recording of Rowan's training exercise from 2 days ago. The angle captured only part of his movements, but it was enough. He was doing more than testing his powers. He was writing, designing, constructing something inside the fabric of the environment. Magic, she thought bitterly. The boy is trying to cast spells. The worst part was, it was working. And now someone else, an external observer, had seen it too. The hollow was no longer a secret, whether it was Koschei, P-Branch, or someone new entirely. She would need to spin this. Control the narrative. If she didn't, she knew how it ended. As a scapegoat, thrown to the wolves of Washington, her life's work dismantled by politicians who barely understood how to operate a microwave. Halberd straightened her lab coat and turned back to the screen. The teens were still visible, still hers for now. But she knew the balance was shifting. She could feel it, as real as the pulse of electricity beneath the floor. "I need a win," she murmured. Just one clear win. Behind her, the status light above the door blinked yellow, and another system alert awaited. Another message. Another problem. She didn't turn to look. Stay tuned for our next exciting episode of the 8-Inch Conundrum, coming soon to this YouTube channel. Please remember to like, subscribe, and comment.